afternoon. Welcome to Facebook chat, Talk to Internal Audit. I'm Liz Sandwith and I'm the Chief Professional Practice Advisor from the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors. The Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors, as those of you that know and join me regularly, is the only professional body dedicated exclusively to training, supporting and representing internal auditors in the UK and Ireland. We have approximately 10,000 members in all sectors of the economy and all parts of UK and Ireland. Members are part of a global network of 200,000 members in 170 countries, all working to the same international standards and code of ethics. And I apologise for being slightly late today. Not my common or practice standard, but technology got the better of me. I don't know whether there was a demand for the internet or Facebook or whatever, but anyway, I'm here and looking forward to our chat. Got my glass of water. It's quite humid in Leeds today. Those of you that perhaps were with me last week will remember I was moaning about the rain. So today we haven't got blue sky and sun, but it's quite humid. But today's topic is the growing importance of ESG. The coronavirus pandemic is morphing. I don't need to tell you that. This time it will test our abilities to manage workplace safety, in particular occupational safety. In this stream, we take a COVID lens to environmental, social and governance, ESG, issues and explore how they impact on the financial and operational performance of a business in pandemic. Remember, if you like Facebook streams and want to spread the word, and I'm sure you do, be sure to share today's live stream. You can do that by clicking the share button in the corner of your screen. The more the merrier. First, we need to understand what ESG is. I'm sure that you've all heard a lot of people talk about ESG. Perhaps you know what it is, perhaps you've wondered. ESG is environmental, social and governance. It's a generic term used in capital markets and used by investors to evaluate corporate behaviour and to determine the future financial performance of companies. ESG factors are a subset of non-financial performance indicators, which include sustainability, ethical and corporate governance issues, such as managing the company's carbon footprint and ensuring there are systems in place to ensure accountability. So now we know what it is, some context as to source. The story of ESG investing began in January 2004, when the former UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan, wrote to over 50 CEOs of major financial institutions, inviting them to participate in a joint initiative under the auspices of the UN Global Compact and with the support of International Finance Corporation and the Swiss government. The goal of the initiative was to find ways to integrate ESG into capital markets. But I don't want you to think that ESG is simply about the financial market. Sorry, cough. It is applicable for all of us, every organisation, whether you manufacture furniture, whether you run a farm, more of that later, or whether you are in the investing world, ESG is relevant. So we know what it is, we know what the letters stand for. So let's now have a look at what is included in each of the elements. Environmental. Conservation of the natural world is the subtitle, and it includes climate change, carbon emissions, air and water pollution, biodiversity, deforestation, energy efficiency, waste management, water scarcity. A lot of those are topics that you'll all be familiar with and a lot of them will be things that touch our lives on a regular basis. Environmental factors include the contribution a company or government makes to climate change through greenhouse gas emissions, along with waste management and energy efficiency. So it's a bit more than just remembering to turn the light off if you're the last one in the room, or, in the case of my husband, remembering to turn lights off when he comes to bed. Not always very good at that. Given renewed efforts to combat global warming, cutting emissions and decarbonising is becoming more important. So what's the social element? Subtitle is Consideration of People and Relationships, Customer Satisfaction, Data Protection and Privacy, Gender and Diversity, Employee Engagement, Community Relations, Human Rights, Labour Standards. So you think over the last 21 weeks, think about community relations. We've seen example after example on the news about how communities have pulled together to support others in their community, to support people who are shielding, to support families where mum or dad or partner is an essential worker, perhaps in the NHS. So we've seen lots and lots of examples of that. Gender and diversity has impacted us all recently. There has been lots, hasn't there, in the news about Black Lives Matter, LGBT, all sorts of topics. And of course, data protection and privacy, paramount importance, and something that is really beginning to strike home. Now we're all working from home and perhaps don't have those reminders that we would have in the office about, where did that email come from? Is it a phishing email? Should I respond? What should I do? So we need to pay particular attention to this. So as I've said, social includes human rights, labour standards in the supply chain, any exposure to illegal child labour. Where are your suppliers? Where are your customers? Is child labour an issue? And more routine issues such as adherence to workplace health and safety. We will all be aware, as people start to go back into the office, the importance of making sure that we are complying with the government's requirements in terms of social distancing, for example. And I know organisations are making sure that they have rotas perhaps for people in the office to reduce the volume and to ensure that it is possible to socially distance. So, we need to bear that in mind, and that is part of workplace health and safety. A social score also rises if a company is well integrated with its local community and therefore has a social licence to operate with consent. So then what does governance mean? I'm sure we're all sitting there thinking, oh, absolutely, get governance. So it's about board composition, audit committee structure, bribery and corruption, executive compensation. Did you remember the headline the other day that talked about executive pay cuts weren't all they appeared to be? I didn't see any more, but I think that was the headline. Lobbying and political contributions and whistleblower or speak up, I prefer the term speak up, schemes. Governance refers to a set of rules or principles defining rights, responsibilities and expectations between different stakeholders in the governance of corporations. And that governance of corporations doesn't necessarily mean the huge banks. It's every organisation. There are things here that we can learn no matter how big or how small your organisation is. So don't just assume this doesn't apply to me. A well-defined corporate governance system can be used to balance or align interests between stakeholders and can work as a tool to support a company's long-term strategy. Where is your company going? What does its future look like? The European Federation of Financial Analysts Societies, big title, has identified 9 topic areas, all of which can are included in internal audit plans in terms of assurance around how your organisation is behaving, energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions, staff turnover, training and qualification, maturity of your workforce, absenteeism rates, litigation risk, corruption, and revenues from new products. So let's look at revenues from new products first. During this COVID-19 weeks so far, I think we're on 21 weeks now, aren't we? There have been a number of organisations that have moved into new products, whether that's been a Formula One team making ventilation equipment or Burberry and Barbour making PPE equipment. People have risen to the challenge that the COVID-19 virus has presented to us and look to diversify into markets, because otherwise potentially production lines will be sitting still, stagnating in effect. So there have been opportunities and organisations have exploited those opportunities. And when I say exploited, I don't mean that in a profiteering way. I mean seized the moment and found out how they can contribute to the greater good, to support their fellow man in this difficult time, or fellow person I should say, shouldn't I? So could I just mention agriculture? Some of you will know I'm the wife of a dairy farmer, and so I'm surrounded daily by cows. One of the challenges that we have with cows is the volume of methane they emit. Apparently 99.9% of methane is emitted, and I hope you aren't eating, every time they burp. So there are things that can be done. So I don't know whether you've seen in the farming press that they've created a mask that will go over the face of the cow so that when it burps, the mask absorbs the methane so it doesn't go into the atmosphere. My husband was suitably appalled by that, not from a conservation perspective or a climate change perspective, but he thought it might be cruel to the cows, and he is a very compassionate farmer. There's other alternatives as well. I was at the Scottish Conference 2 years ago talking about Risk in Focus, which by the way is due out in September, and one of the risks I was talking about was climate change. And I was asked from the audience, they said, could we ask you a question that's not to do with climate change? And they asked me if my husband fed our cows seaweed. I looked puzzled and said, not as far as I'm aware. And I came home and I mentioned it to John, my husband, and he said there are now concentrates that contain seaweed that is supposed to be helpful for farmers, well, for the animals really, but also helpful for the environment. So, you know, we can look at things like that when we explore all our worlds, all our lives, not just necessarily the office environment that we're in every day. And today, my husband has had the people who buy his milk and then process it, they've been on the phone to him talking about the very thing I'm just talking about, which is climate change, wanting to know about fertiliser he puts on the land. And they gave him a tick and said, because we use natural fertiliser, we are in a good place. So thinking about this, please don't think it is purely and simply about the office world. Think about it in every aspect of our lives. So next time you see some cows in the field, think about, or wonder perhaps, whether they're being fed seaweed, because that helps in terms of methane emissions. So ESG factors cover a wide spectrum of issues that are traditionally not part of financial analysis, yet may have financial relevance. This might include how corporations respond to climate change, how good they are with water management, how effective their health and safety policies are in protection against accidents, how they manage their supply chains, how they treat their workers, and whether they have a corporate culture that builds trust and fosters innovation. There are some great quotes regarding ESG. Quotes from Westpac, Goldman Sachs, DuPont. The Goldman Sachs one talks about environmental and social issues count. And he said, this is the one of the senior management there, in an increasingly complex world, we believe such issues are part of the relative quality of overall management performance needed to compete successfully. So what are your competitors doing in whichever sector you're operating in? Let's think about that for a moment. So if you're just joining us today, welcome to our live stream, Talk to Internal Audit. Our theme today is the growing importance of ESG. And as I've said, the coronavirus pandemic is morphing. This time it's going to test our abilities to manage workplace safety, in particular occupational safety. And in this stream, we're taking a COVID lens to environmental, social and governance issues and exploring how they impact on the financial and operational performance of a business in a pandemic. So we've got some background. We've talked about some of the issues. We've wondered perhaps whether or not it is relevant to us. So now what? Well, okay, what's our role? What is internal audit's role in this new and challenging environment in which we find ourselves? If we consider our organisation and our key stakeholders and the stakeholders of internal audit in particular, and from a governance perspective, so I'm thinking board, audit committee, senior management, are they looking to you as internal audit to provide assurance in relation to key ESG challenges? At this juncture, I would like to invite anyone watching to feedback in your comment section on examples of how you personally perhaps have adapted your working practices and perhaps even your personal practices that could be considered part of a wider environmental, social and governance change. Alternatively, you can respond to the poll, which I am just about to put on your screen to see what your thinking is. And my polling question is, do you consider ESG in its widest sense an important topic for internal audit? The poll will appear and I will be asking you to answer yes, no, not sure. So far I'm seeing, and I know you can't see yet, but I'm seeing 100% yes, that you do consider it important. So I'll show the results so you can see them on the screen. Interesting that 100%, because Risk in Focus last year picked up some of these issues as relatively low on the list of top 10. So, you know, I think it's quite interesting that we see that. So there we go. I'm going to, oh, we've got some different results now. So I'm going to post them on the screen and hopefully you can see those in a moment. So, EY's European Audit Committee Leadership Network highlighted some questions for internal auditors perhaps to ask of Audit Committee Board and to ask generally perhaps across their organisation. So what kinds of demands is your company getting from shareholders with regard to ESG reporting? What regulatory requirements is the company facing? Now, thinking about this, we need to look forward a bit because I think there's going to be some quite stringent reporting requirements as we move forward. They're not necessarily all here at the moment, but they are coming down the track. So we need to be sure that from an internal audit perspective, if our organisations are going to publish results, then we need to make sure that they're accurate, don't we? So we need to factor that in. In general terms, how far along is your company in implementing ESG reporting? So does it produce reports internally? What kind of ESG measures and reports has your company decided to publish? How did it choose those measures? What challenges did the company face in establishing a system for collecting, verifying and reporting ESG information? So from our perspective as internal auditors, those are absolutely valid questions that we could be asking of our organisation, aren't they? And we could be exploring to help our organisation perhaps raise ESG topic on our agendas, put it on the board agenda, on the audit committee agenda, and absolutely put it on our internal audit plan, the various elements of that. And I think perhaps if you look at your plan for 2021, although bearing in mind we've been hit by COVID-19, I think you will find that some elements of the ESG agenda are probably already in your plan. But what more could we do as internal audit to raise the profile? So how and where might internal audit contribute to the ESG agenda? How were controls developed and implemented across the various elements? What kind of assurance is applied to ESG reporting? So are we looking at it? Are we testing the numbers? Are we questioning and challenging? What do we do? Where are we on this agenda? And what level of assurance, if any, is provided by third party? Perhaps your suppliers? Do you get any information from your customers? Productivity suggested questions that boards of directors might want to consider, or internal audit might want to ask, based on the risks inherent in your organisation's operations. So if the company does not report, does not issue sustainability reports, has the board considered whether it should? Are your competitors issuing reports? Are major shareholders raising concerns that merit attention and follow-up? So could we do more as an organisation, as a board, as an audit committee, as internal audit? If your company issues sustainability reports, does the reporting provide sufficient insight into its non-financial activities related to ESG matters? Is it sufficiently focused on the ESG criteria that your customers, suppliers, investors are following in the industry? Does management focus on ESG reporting as a compliance activity? Is your second line doing anything in this space? Or is it truly integrated with the corporate strategy? As internal audit, might these questions be questions you ask yourself and also ask senior management and stakeholders within your organisation? Remember, we have to have the confidence to speak truth to power. The elements of ESG affect all our lives, not just ours, but our children's, grandchildren's, and in my case, great-grandchildren. So we need to think about what the future is going to look like. And are we, at this point in time, doing our best within our organisations as internal audit to question, to challenge, to promote topics that perhaps haven't yet made it to our audit committee or our board's agenda? Are we doing enough? So if you're just joining me, welcome to our live stream, Talk to Internal Audit. Today's theme is the growing importance of ESG. As I said, the coronavirus is morphing. We need to test our abilities to manage workplace safety, occupational safety. And in this stream, we are taking the COVID lens to environmental, social and governance issues. And we're exploring how they impact on the financial and operational performance of a business in a pandemic scenario. So, in effect, today's real world. That's what we're looking at. IIA Global, in the June edition of Tone at the Top, looked at ESG's role in managing COVID-19 impact and risk. And if you're a member of the Institute, you can simply log in to IIA Global's website and download the Tone at the Top. Very short, very focused, very good article that's worth reading. So bear that in mind if you are exploring ESG in your internal audit plan. So now is the time to employ an ESG mindset. Do you remember last week we talked about an agile mindset? Gosh, all of these different mindsets we're developing to investigate the root causes of corporate vulnerabilities and understand where and why existing plans did not meet expectations. In performing the review, an ESG and risk management examination should include such questions as: did the risk registers include all the risks? Were the risk registers written and maintained by personnel with the appropriate expertise and skill sets? Did the organisation use specialists effectively to identify and assess risks and to evaluate risk mitigation measures? I'm getting a bit tongue-tied today, aren't I? Were risks that originated outside the organisation accurately considered? Perhaps those with your supply chains, your warehousing, your customer demands. Did your organisation effectively identify new or emerging risks, including information submitted through whistleblowing hotlines, or I rather call it speak up? Were business continuity plans up to date, tested, revised and maintained? And did they, in this pandemic scenario, did they protect the health and safety of your workforce? And as you return to work, is the protection, the health and safety of your workforce paramount? That's a question, a good question for internal audit perhaps to ask. Organisations also should examine what caused impacts to be so substantial for this crisis and ask questions such as: were provisions for paid sick leave sufficient? Did employees feel pressured to come to work even if they were sick? Was the company overly reliant on one vendor for a critical product or service? Was a just-in-time supply chain stretched too thin? Were communications networks established and operating? Were employees able to use them? Did the organisation's culture support speaking up? We all know, and internal audit more than any, know the importance of the culture within our organisation. So in this instance, in this horrendous crisis that we have found ourselves, did your speak up policy work? And did the culture support your staff speaking up if they were concerned? Were persistent audit recommendations and suggestions addressed? Finally, how can internal audit build awareness and get involved? Perhaps by providing an assurance to key stakeholders. For example, undertake internal audits in key risk areas: climate change, risk versus opportunity. The Institute has a project to explore climate change, and there's currently a climate change survey. So please ensure you complete the survey, as your responses are important to us. The survey ends tomorrow, Friday the 7th, so be sure to get your responses in as soon as possible. And I can hear you thinking, why is it important? It's important because we want to support our members. We want to equip you with the guidance and the tools necessary to help you support your organisations through ESG elements, requirements, obligations, so that you can provide that valuable assurance to your audit committee and board. Other areas such as business resilience, brand value, reputation, human capital, the organisation of the future. How well have your staff been protected during this challenging time? Governance, ethics and culture. Digitisation and business model disruption. The Institute has a project to explore disruption, and there will be a panel discussion at the Internal Audit Conference on the 30th of September and 1st of October. And of course, financial and non-financial reporting. Risk in Focus 2021 is due to be launched in September, and I anticipate that some, if not all, of the above things that we've been looking at and exploring today will be in the top 10 risks that are facing organisations and internal audit in the coming months and years, particularly in this time of so much uncertainty in what we're doing, what organisations are doing, what our countries are doing, and globally what's going on. As internal audit, we need to be ahead of the curve and support our organisations to focus on the ESG agenda. The agenda becomes increasingly important as the profile of all of the elements of ESG have been brought into sharp focus by COVID-19. Climate impact. I don't know whether you saw that picture. I think it was in the Times of Portsmouth Harbour, and it did a sort of before and after. You know, before the lockdown, before COVID hit, you couldn't see the sea. It was just black. It looked like black water. And then after lockdown, there was a picture of the Portsmouth Harbour and the sea was green. You could even see fish in the picture swimming about. What a difference that made. Not suggesting a lockdown is the answer to everything or even the answer to climate change, but it just goes to show how things impact that perhaps we hadn't anticipated. So the impact is important. Governance issues. There have been challenges, I know, during the last 20 weeks with some of our organisations' governance committees not being able to be held because of the virtual obligations and the challenges around virtual meetings. What's that meant to your organisation if you were impacted? Risk management, along with recent high-profile diversity and inclusion incidents that impact on gender and diversity. Employee engagement, human rights and community engagement. All of these things have, as I've said, been brought into really sharp focus during COVID-19. So it may bring many challenges for organisations and for us as individuals. However, it is also a powerful game changer in terms of ways of working. It has provided a similar impetus for change, but far more widely. It's shaken up all sectors to a greater or lesser extent and has forced organisations and their customers into new ways of operating and thinking. It is already clear that the crisis has accelerated many long-term trends, such as automation and the switch to cleaner, more environmentally friendly power. It's probably too early to see whether more people will continue to work from home or to shop in different ways in the longer term. What is the path back to normal? And do we want to go back to where we were before this? And what will it look like post-pandemic? So let's think of it as a new future, new opportunities, new ways of working. For those charged with governance, it may be helpful to consider the difference between impact and risk. How a clear understanding of ESG can place it in front and centre in supporting business success and longevity. The investment community is predicting that organisations with embedded ESG principles will better manage investment risk and rebound much, much quicker from the pandemic crisis. So is that your organisation? So in conclusion, those of you who are just turning in now, today we spoke about the growing importance of ESG and what it means and why it's important from an internal audit and organisational perspective in a world full of change and uncertainty. The live stream is available afterwards for those of your friends, colleagues who may have missed the live version on the Institute's Facebook channel. Follow all the exciting things the Institute is doing on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. As a member, you have access to the latest edition of the Audit and Risk magazine, which is available on our website. I'm always happy to take questions via email at liz.sandwith@iia.org.uk. Please reach out to me. More than happy to help in any way I can. Next week, 13th of August, we will be exploring what the future of internal audit looks like. After working remotely for several months now, audit teams have been rethinking how they approach workplaces and work processes in the period ahead. Embracing recent lessons learned from the virtual workplace to build more flexible and adaptability into audit operations going forward. So join us as we look into the future of internal audit and beyond where we are now. As we move forward into the new future, please don't forget to book your slot in your diary. 4 p.m. every Thursday, I'm here. Unless technology lets me down again. Sorry about that. Don't forget to bring your coffee, tea, water. And please remember, talk to Internal Audit because the Institute is listening. Thank you. Stay safe. Have a good weekend. We're nearly there. Bye.